I was 7 years old and was in the shower with my sister and my parents, who were crying and holding each other. I couldn't find my way out of the shower. It was too steamy. It was the first time that I felt lost and trapped, both at the same time. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't get away from the crying and just couldn't find my way out. Throughout my childhood, my parents kept on checking in with me, and asking me, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you all right? And I would tell them I was okay, because I thought on some level I was. But it felt like something was missing, like part of my body was gone. And I didn't know if I could get it back or would ever get it back. But I kept on telling my parents, yeah, I'm okay. And just kept pushing it away, pushing it aside. I was 15 when I first experienced my night terrors. I would wake myself up in the middle of the night from just sweating and crying, and my face would just be wet with tears, and I couldn't get back to sleep. I was too scared to go back to sleep. So I started to cut myself. The next morning I would wake up, didn't want to go to school. So then I would cut myself. Then when I would get home from school, I was alone. I made it that day. I made it that other day. And I would cut myself. It became a routine to me to cut myself, and almost it was like a punishment, but also I could breathe when I did it. I could, even though it was painful, I could finally gasp for air. I could feel something instead of just walking around like a zombie. So I would cut myself to help myself sleep, or I would cut myself to help myself get out of bed the next day. It became hourly. Until one day, I couldn't stop. I cut myself because I felt worthless, and I cut myself because I didn't save him. So I would do it deeper, and this time I couldn't feel it. So I did it deeper again, and I cut myself. You're so stupid. How could you not say anything? How could you watch him and not say anything? And the deeper I got, I still couldn't feel anything until I gave up and realized this is how he must have felt. It terrified me, and I somehow got to my phone and called over my two best friends, who they quickly came over and they saw my cuts, and they said, if you don't tell your parents how you're feeling, and they don't tell you, or you don't tell them what you're doing, then we will. Tell them tonight. So they got home from work, and I did one of the most difficult things that I had to do, and I told my parents that I had been lying to them about how I was feeling, and that I really wasn't doing good at all, and that I was cutting myself, and I showed them my cuts. And my dad looked at me right in the eyes, and he said, you can't help others unless you help yourself first. What do you want to do? I knew that I didn't want to keep on living like how I was, but I also knew that I couldn't take my life, because I knew the pain it would cause my family. So I looked at him back and I said, I need help. So I'm sitting in my therapist's office, and he tells me to just shut my eyes and remember the first thing that I remember, or talk about the first thing I remember. So I told him everything. I was 7 years old, and my brother had gotten me some popcorn, got me some water. He set me up in front of a movie, and he asked me if I needed anything else. And when I said no, he started to walk away. but he started to walk away slowly. And I could see that he was looking at me I had never seen that look on his face before. And I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong with the look. And I was about to say, come watch this movie with me, but I didn't. He broke the look and he walked into the next room and shut the door. I heard the loudest sound that I've ever heard in my entire life. It shook the rest of the house. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I just sat there frozen and I couldn't breathe. I eventually got up and went to the door, tried to open it, but it was locked. So, Jeff, I knocked. Jeff? Started to pound a little bit. Could feel the wood underneath my hands, and I just kept pounding and pounding at it. Jeff, where are you? Jeff! I tried kicking it down, but it was locked, and he made sure it was locked. As I was sitting in my therapist's office, I could taste the strawberries I had to eat after his funeral. I could smell the rubber of the basketball that his teammates had signed for him. And when I opened my eyes, I wasn't a 7-year-old anymore. I was 18 years old, and I felt like my brother had just died an hour ago instead of 10 years ago. So I continued with the therapy, and it was a very intense therapy lasting for about 3 months. And when I went back for my last session, I closed my eyes, and this time, the only thing I saw, instead of all of that tragedy, the only thing I saw was his face, was the last look that he gave me. And this time I could put my finger on it. I could see that he didn't abandon me. He had made sure I had food, that I had water, and that he had locked the door so I wouldn't see anything so gruesome. I could see on his face that there was a little bit of a smirk there because he wanted to say that he loved me, but in that moment he couldn't, and I could understand that now. I could understand that he was silently saying goodbye to me, and he was looking at me, and he was proud of me. So when I opened my eyes again, and I saw my therapist, and I was sitting across from him, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, you're actually glowing right now." And I think that glow that he was talking about is the first time that I felt happy and I felt at peace. I was able to understand where my brother's thought process was, and that he did love me, and that I was and I still am worth it. And this time, I can breathe. And the air around me isn't poisonous anymore. Thank you.